Why you are terrified to face the real you. Carl Jung, Analytical Psychology. There is a stranger living inside your skin, sharing your thoughts, breathing your air, and making decisions for you while you sleep. You see this person every single morning when you look in the mirror, but you don't really recognize them. You see the surface, the familiar lines of your face, the color of your eyes, and the expression you've practiced for the world. But behind that reflection lies a vast, uncharted territory that you have spent your entire life avoiding. Most people go from the cradle to the grave without ever truly meeting themselves, and they do this not out of laziness, but out of a deep, primal terror. We are all carrying a secret that we haven't even told ourselves yet, a hidden dimension of our own being that feels so dangerous and so volatile that we would rather live a lie than face the truth of who we are. Carl Jung, the legendary Swiss psychiatrist, dedicated his entire life to mapping this internal wilderness, and what he discovered is both the most frightening and the most liberating truth a human being can encounter. He realized that the version of yourself you present to the world is nothing more than a thin cardboard cutout, a fragile mask designed to please others, while the real you, the raw, unfiltered and powerful version of your soul, remains locked in a basement of your own making. But here is the question that should keep you awake at night. What happens when that basement door finally breaks open? You probably know the feeling of being an imposter in your own life. It's that subtle, persistent itch at the back of your mind, telling you that if people really knew what you were thinking, if they saw the impulses you suppress, or the darkness you hide, they would turn away in horror. You go through your day playing a role, being the good son or daughter, the productive employee, the reliable friend. But there is a friction between that performance and the reality of your internal experience. You feel exhausted, not because of the work you do, but because of the energy it takes to keep the mask from slipping. This isn't just a personal quirk. It is a universal human condition that defines our modern existence. We have become experts at curating our external identities, decorating our digital lives, and refining our social personas, yet we feel more hollow than ever before. We are terrified of silence, because in the silence, the voices we've suppressed start to whisper. We are terrified of being alone, because when there is no one else to perform for, we are left with a stranger who demands an explanation. You might think you know why you're unhappy or why you're anxious, but the truth is likely far more complex and far more interesting than the surface-level reasons you tell yourself. But why is the mind so determined to hide parts of itself from its own consciousness? Why would nature design a psyche that is fundamentally divided against itself? This is where the mystery of the human condition truly begins. Imagine your mind as a grand ancient estate. There are the brightly lit rooms where you entertain guests, the polished hallways where you walk with confidence, and the beautiful gardens you show to the world. This is your ego, the center of your conscious awareness. But this estate also has vast, dark sublevels, winding tunnels, and locked chambers that haven't been opened in decades. These are the places where you have stuffed everything about yourself that didn't fit the perfect image you wanted to project. Every time you were told as a child that your anger was bad, you threw it into the basement. Every time you were shamed for your desires, your creativity, or your unconventional thoughts, you locked them away in those dark rooms. Over time, these rejected parts of yourself didn't just disappear. They began to ferment, to grow, and to take on a life of their own. This is what Jung called the shadow, and it is the most misunderstood part of the human experience. But there is a darker layer to this story that most people never consider, a detail that almost nobody perceives until it's too late. The shadow isn't just a collection of your flaws or your evil impulses. That is a common misconception that keeps people from ever looking inward. In reality, the shadow contains everything you have deemed unacceptable, which often includes your greatest strengths, your most potent creativity, and your most authentic power. When you bury your capacity for aggression, you also bury your capacity for assertiveness and protection. When you bury your weirdness, You bury the very spark of genius that makes you unique. The terror you feel when you think about facing the real you isn't just a fear of your darkness. It is a fear of your own magnitude. It is the fear that if you were to truly become whole, you would no longer fit into the small, comfortable life you've built for yourself. You would have to change everything. You would have to stop seeking approval and start seeking truth. And here is where the mystery deepens. The shadow doesn't stay in the basement. It leaks. It manifests in your life as bad luck, as recurring patterns of self-sabotage, as toxic relationships that you seem to attract over and over again. Jung famously said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. As we move deeper into the labyrinth of the psyche, we begin to see how this internal division plays out in our daily interactions. Have you ever met someone and felt an immediate, irrational surge of hatred or intense irritation toward them, even though they haven't actually done anything to you? This is what Jung called projection. The qualities you despise in others are almost always the qualities you have suppressed in yourself. Because you cannot face your own arrogance, your own laziness, or your own selfishness, you see it in everyone else and react with a vehemence that is totally disproportionate to the situation. It's as if your psyche is trying to show you your own shadow by reflecting it on the screen of the world. But here is the detail that almost nobody realizes. The more you judge others, the more you are revealing the architecture of your own internal prison. We spend our lives fighting ghosts in the outside world, never realizing that the battle is actually taking place within our own souls. This is why facing the real you is so terrifying. It requires you to take back all those projections, to stop being a victim of the horrible people around you, and to admit that the monster you've been fighting out there is actually a part of who you are in here. But there is something even more profound happening beneath the surface of your personal struggles. Jung believed that we aren't just shaped by our personal experiences, but by a vast collective ocean of human history called the collective unconscious. This is a reservoir of archetypes, universal patterns and symbols that have existed in the human mind since the dawn of time. When you face the real you, you aren't just facing your childhood traumas or your personal quirks. You are stepping into a cosmic drama. You are facing the hero, the wise old man, the great mother, and yes, the devil. You are tapping into a power that is far greater than your individual ego. This is why the process of self-discovery, or individuation as Jung called it, often feels like a religious or mystical experience. It is the process of becoming a complete human being, not a perfect one. Jung believed that the goal of life wasn't to be good or happy in the conventional sense, but to be whole. And you cannot be whole if you are missing half of your soul. It is at this point that everything begins to make sense, but it is also the point where most people turn back and run toward the safety of their distractions. The process of integrating the shadow requires a level of honesty that is almost physically painful. It requires you to look at your most shameful thoughts, your most selfish desires, and your most embarrassing failures and say, "This is me." It requires you to realize that you are capable of the same horrors as the villains you see on the news, and that the only thing keeping you from them is often just circumstance or fear, not inherent goodness. This realization is a crushing blow to the ego, but it is the only way to gain true moral agency. You cannot be truly virtuous if you are simply a nice person, because you are too afraid to be anything else. True virtue comes from being a person who is capable of great destruction, but chooses to use their power for good. If you don't know your own capacity for darkness, you are not a good person. You are a harmless person, and there is a massive difference between the two. The path toward the real you is a descent before it is an ascent. You must go down into the darkness, into the parts of yourself you have ignored for decades, and you must stay there until your eyes adjust. This is what is known in various traditions as the dark night of the soul, or the hero's journey. It is the moment where all your old coping mechanisms fail, where your mask cracks, and where you are forced to confront the void. Our modern culture is designed to help us avoid this descent at all costs. We have endless entertainment, constant social validation, and a pharmaceutical industry ready to numb any hint of internal discomfort. We are told that we should always feel happy, always be positive, and always keep moving forward. But Jung would argue that the depression or anxiety you feel is often not a disease to be cured, but a messenger to be heard. It is your soul's way of telling you that you are living a lie, that you have strayed too far from your authentic self, and that the real you is dying for attention. Here is the secret that lies in what you hate most. The very things you are most ashamed of, the parts of yourself you find most repulsive, are often the keys to your transformation. In alchemy, there is a saying, "In sterquilinis invenitur," which means, "In filth it shall be found." The gold you are looking for in your life is hidden in the very places you don't want to look. Your path to purpose, your path to deep connection with others, and your path to inner peace is located right in the heart of your shadow. When you finally stop running and turn to face the real you, you discover something miraculous. The monster you were so afraid of isn't a monster at all. It is a frightened, neglected part of yourself that just wanted to be seen. It is energy that has been twisted because it was rejected. When you acknowledge it, when you bring it into the light of your conscious awareness, it begins to transform. The anger becomes passion. The fear becomes caution. The arrogance becomes self-respect. You begin to feel a sense of vitality and strength that you haven't felt since you were a small child, before the world told you who you were supposed to be. But the revelation that changes everything is this: the real you is not a destination, but a process. You don't find yourself and then stay there forever. To face the real you is to commit to a lifelong dialogue between your conscious mind and the vast mysteries of your unconscious. It is a commitment to radical responsibility. You can no longer blame your parents, your partner, or society for your problems once you realize that the source of your suffering is the internal war you are waging against yourself. This is why people are terrified. It is much easier to be a victim of the world than it is to be the master of one's own soul. Responsibility is a heavy burden, but it is the only thing that can give your life meaning. When you stop pretending to be the person you think you should be, you finally have the energy to become the person you were meant to be. The detail that almost nobody perceives is that your identity is actually a cage. We spend so much time building this identity, defending it and polishing it, but we don't realize that it is what keeps us small. We say, "I'm the kind of person who doesn't do that," or "I'm not the type to feel this way," and in doing so, we cut off vast sections of human experience. We become caricatures of ourselves. Facing the real you means being willing to let that identity die. It means being willing to be wrong about who you are. It means embracing the contradictions within you, realizing that you can be both kind and cruel, brave and cowardly, wise and foolish. This complexity is not a flaw. It is the essence of being human. When you accept your own contradictions, you stop being a walking civil war and start being a unified force. Think about the last time you felt truly alive. It was likely a moment where you forgot yourself, where the mask fell away and you were simply being. In those moments, you weren't trying to be anything. You were the real you. The tragedy of modern life is that we experience these moments only by accident, through high adrenaline sports, through love, or through crisis. But Jung's analytical psychology offers a way to live in that state of authenticity more consistently. It starts with the courage to look at your dreams, to listen to your slips of the tongue, and to pay attention to your irrational emotions. These are the telegrams from the unconscious, trying to bridge the gap between your ego and your soul. As you begin to integrate your shadow, you will notice a strange phenomenon. The world around you begins to change. Your relationships become more honest and less draining because you are no longer projecting your internal conflicts onto others. You find that you have more energy because you are no longer spending it all on mask maintenance. You discover a sense of humor about yourself that you never had before because you are no longer terrified of being seen as imperfect. But more importantly, you develop a sense of compassion for others. When you have faced your own internal demons, you can no longer judge the demons in others with the same coldness. You see the struggle in everyone you meet. You realize that everyone is carrying a heavy burden of suppressed truth, and this realization is the foundation of true empathy. We live in a world that is increasingly polarized, where everyone is convinced they are the good guy and the others are the bad guys. This is the ultimate collective projection of the shadow. We are witnessing what happens when millions of people refuse to face the real them and instead choose to fight their own darkness in the form of political enemies, social movements, or cultural others. Jung warned that the greatest danger to humanity is not nature, but the human psyche itself, especially when it is unaware of its own depth. If we do not do the individual work of facing ourselves, we are doomed to act out our internal conflicts on a global scale. The war you refuse to fight within yourself will eventually manifest as a war in the outside world. Facing the real you is the most difficult thing you will ever do, but it is also the only thing worth doing. Everything else is just a distraction, a way to pass the time until the clock runs out. You are not the person you think you are. You are something much bigger, much more complicated, and much more beautiful. You are a bridge between the animal and the divine, between the dark depths of the past and the infinite possibilities of the future. The terror you feel at the thought of looking inward is simply the resistance of your ego, which knows that its absolute reign is coming to an end. It is the fear of the caterpillar as it enters the cocoon, not knowing that it is about to become something entirely different. As you move through your life after this moment, pay attention to the friction. Pay attention to the moments of shame, the moments of intense judgment, and the moments of deep, inexplicable longing. These are the breadcrumbs leading you back to yourself. Don't turn away from them. Don't try to fix them with more productivity or more entertainment. Sit with them. Ask them what they want from you. The real you is not a monster to be tamed, but a partner to be embraced. You have spent your whole life being a stranger to your own soul, but it doesn't have to stay that way. The door to the basement is right there, and you have the key in your hand. You have always had the key. In the end, we must ask ourselves, what are we so afraid of losing? We are afraid of losing a version of ourselves that isn't even real. We are clinging to a ghost, while the living, breathing reality of our being is waiting in the dark to be claimed. Life is not about becoming a saint. It is about becoming a man or a woman in full, with all the light and heat that entails. It is about standing in the center of your own existence and saying yes to everything you are. The journey of individuation is not for the faint of heart, but it is the only path that leads to true freedom. It is the path from being a mere spectator of your life to being its creator. Reflect on this. If you died today, would you have even met the person you were meant to be? Or would you have only met the person you were told to be? The tragedy of an unlived life is the greatest tragedy of all. The world doesn't need more perfect people. The world is starving for whole people, for people who are grounded in their own truth, who have faced their darkness and found the gold within it. You are the only person who can do this work. No one can face your shadow for you. No one can tell you who you are. The mystery of your own being is yours alone to solve. And while the path is terrifying and the descent is deep, the rewards are beyond anything the ego could ever imagine. You are not a fragment, you are a whole. It is time to stop being afraid of the stranger in the mirror and start the long, beautiful walk home to yourself. The real you has been waiting for a very long time, and they are ready when you are. The only question left is whether you have the courage to knock on the door of your own heart and see who answers.